know what she said. She might just change your life.
And we are in studio with Joseph A. Newberger. It's time for the Legal Beat. Plain talk about legal, liberty, and social justice issues that impact all Canadians, what we need to know and want to talk about. Joseph, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
Oh, this is something I definitely want to talk about because, a charter challenge has now been launched against C-51, the, anti-terrorism bill. And at first guess, I'm going to think you're all for this, that you think the charter challenge should go ahead.
Yes. I think legislation that is as broad as this, which has added powers to CSIS, created new offenses in the criminal code, and expands the no-fly list, where there really is no substantial review, has to be tested by the courts. So it's very important that the legislation is tested in this manner.
So who is leading the challenge?
Well, there's a number of organizations, but the Canadian Civil Liberties Association is the lead. There's also the Canadian Journalists for Free Expression, but this has drawn the attention of a number of civil liberties associations across Canada. So the Civil Liberties Association is the lead on it, but there has been outspoken opposition by the other parties in Parliament, as well as lawyers across the country.
Joseph, is part of the issue that there is no accountability once this is passed? I mean,
It is passed.
It's passed.
It's passed,
Yeah,
but I
so
mean,
we've got it going now. It's operational. I think the issues are there's broad sweeping powers for sharing of private information among government agencies with no oversight whatsoever. There's no oversight really to the no-fly list. There's an internal appeal. It doesn't go to a court. CSIS's activities, although intended, of course, for all our protection, really will not be viewed or assessed by any parliamentary committee or other committee or the courts until something happens which is extreme.
so there's no oversight, there's no accountability, and there's obviously no transparency. So you could go to an airport, I mean, that's what they're saying, and suddenly find that you're on a list.
Correct.
And nobody has to tell you that you're on the list. Nobody has to tell you why you're on the list. You can't argue your case.
Correct. At the airport, you're not going to get any information.
Well, not at the airport, but
right.
I mean,
wherever you are, you're going to be on a no-fly list. If you try and book a ticket, you're going to be on it. So
Yeah.
then you're going to have to contact a lawyer, and then you're going to have to go through an internal appeal. You're going to be given very limited information. So that's serious. There's also issues about people who are in the process of being deported. There's these secret meetings which are going on about people who may be suspected issues for Canadian security. There's deportation hearings. We've also got the expansion of the preventative detention. There are so many facets of this legislation which unfortunately are not transparent and can be abused.
do you think that it was rushed through?
Yeah, look, we see when there's a tragedy, the shooting of the soldiers at the Parliament buildings, that the government wants to react, and we always see that things are criminalized. There's always some piece of legislation that comes out to try and give the Canadian public the feeling that something is being done, we're enhancing powers, we're going to prevent this. The reality is, if there was more security at Parliament at that time, the shooter could have been taken down much quicker than he was. So this is a political play to some extent. I do believe that there is genuine interest behind it by the government to try and protect Canadians, because the reality is we're living in a different time where we have certain threats around the world which can affect Canadians, and we need to be very careful about it. There's extreme stuff going on out there, and we need to be careful. But there are tremendous measures that are in place in the criminal code, the previous anti-terrorism legislation, and we have to be very careful about this. And parts of this does seem to be cobbled together without the sufficient time necessary to study it and look at the amendments that were suggested by other parties.
Okay, so the bit that concerns me, and I'm wondering if it concerns you, is that as I see it, this is an inversion of the way that things is worked before, because they're asking that the courts now take over the judiciary, not Parliament, will be authorizing limits on charter rights, because they're saying if a warrant is needed, it will be up to the courts to decide whether that goes ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think to understand this correctly, it's not uncommon if the police need to search a premise that they're going to
Right.
go to a judge for authorization.
Absolutely.
Okay, so they go to a judge to make sure this is okay and enough grounds exist. What is more significant here is that CSIS, which is normally an information gathering agency, now has powers to disrupt activities that may be a terrorist act in the planning. Those actions that they want to take to disrupt it, they're going to go and try and get judicial authorization. So they're going to go to a judge to see if it's okay to
Right.
have it sanctioned if they have reasonable grounds. And they're going to the federal court for that, not necessarily to the Superior Court where we have judges who are familiar with criminal search warrants, but the federal court has good familiarity. That's not necessarily a difficulty to go get prior judicial authorization. The real issue is, because you wouldn't go to Parliament to do that, the real issue is, should CSIS have this power? That's the bigger issue. We have the RCMP. They're engaged in anti-terrorism actions anyway. They're a law enforcement agency that has been engaged in investigations, arrests, understand evidence. It's giving a significant power to an agency that has traditionally been an information gathering agency, not one that takes proactive, or as they call it, kinetic measures.
So, I mean, how do you see this having an impact on you and me and Christine?
Okay, well, for example, there's broad censorship. So they are, there's constant monitoring of the internet and chats which are going on. They're looking at freedom of expression. So if people are saying things which are extreme, they can take actions in those regards. There's new offense under the criminal code for promoting terrorist activities. It's very vaguely drafted. So the issue with us is that if there's information out there and for some reason somebody gives information about somebody in the community, you, me, or somebody else, and that information then gets shared secretly, then they're searching what you're sending out, what you're doing on the internet, the websites you're going to, what you may be posting, what you may be tweeting, and you could be under investigation and would never know. And that can result in you hitting a no-fly zone list. It could manifest in many ways where they try and disrupt your life. And there is no oversight to this. The information is going to move very quickly amongst agencies. That's the danger for Canadians. Now, taking greater measures to protect us is good, but there must always be checks and balances in place. We must never give away our civil liberties to the extent that we are so scared of something happening that we're willing to give up all our freedom of expression, and our ability to basically have privacy of our information. And those are the balances that need to be struck with legislation like this.
But it sounds also like, guilt by association.
Absolutely, and it can be abused. I mean, unfortunately there can be profiling which goes on. You're with certain groups, you may be listening to certain things, and although you have no intention of committing a terrorist act or even promoting it, you may be censored and you may be caught up in a measure where you really shouldn't be. So there are areas where there could be abuse. We expect government officials, CSIS members, to act, in accordance with the Charter. But these are things where you have to have the proper checks and balances, and that's the problem where there are secret meetings, there's no transparency, no oversight. We need that in a democratic society.
Click the channel subscribe button for full-length interviews and more from What She Said here on YouTube.